영어 원서 읽기 500번 읽기 도전 버니큘러. 오전에 챕터 1부터 3까지 읽었고요. 오늘은 저녁에 제가 시간이 조금 되는 관계로 집에 들어가기 전에 4부터 9까지 읽고 가도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 읽으면 하루 만에 이제 일독을 하게 되는 거죠. 처음에 일독하기에는 조금 하루가 부족한 듯 했는데요. 물론 일하면서 이제 이렇게 읽어야 하니까 시간이 충분하지 않았던 것 같은데, 계속 읽다 보니까 좀 읽는 속도도 좀 빨라지는 것 같고, 좀 영어 원음을 듣고 읽는데요. 섀도우 리딩을 하니까 섀도우 리딩에 맞춰서 제가 읽어지니까 이게 이제 나가는 속도가 꽤 괜찮은 것 같습니다. 버니큘러가 지금 원서 읽기 기준으로 한 WPM 160에서 170 정도 속도로 읽었을 때 원어민들이 93분 22초 걸린다고 되어 있거든요. 저도 지금 이제 이 원음에 맞춰서 읽는 거기 때문에 93분 22초면 한 권이 읽어져야 되는 거예요. 이제 아직까지 제 입에 읽지 않았고 낯선 책이다 보니까 낯선 책이었을 때 훨씬 더 시간이 많이 걸렸었죠. 2시간 이상 걸렸었는데 지금은 약 한 93분, 1시간 반에서 40분 정도 저도 충분히 읽어낼 수 있는 것 같아요. 자, 챕터 4에서부터 읽어 나가도록 하겠습니다. Chapter 4. A cat prepares. I almost didn't make it to my meeting with Chester that night. Toby had a feast in his room. It was Friday night. And on Friday night, Toby gets to stay up and read as late as he wants to. So of course he needs lots of food to keep up his strength. Good food like cheese, crackers, chocolate cupcakes, my very favorite, the kind of cream in the middle, pretzels and peanut butter sandwiches. The last I cannot abide because my mouth always gets stuck. Chocolate cupcakes with cream in the center, however, are another story. This particular evening, I stationed myself on Toby's stomach. Usually, I'm a little more subtle. But having missed out on the bacon at breakfast, I was not about to take any chances on the chocolate cupcakes with the cream in the center. Toby knew what I was after, but sometimes he thinks he's funny, and he plays a little games with me. Hi, Harold. I'll bet you'd like a peanut butter sandwich, wouldn't you? Here, you have this one that left over from yesterday, while I eat this boring old chocolate cupcake, which is nice and fresh and has a cream in the middle. Okay, Harold? Ha, ha, my sides are splitting. What's the matter? Don't you want a peanut butter sandwich? All right, I'll put it away for another night. Oh, here's something you might like. It's a green sour ball from Denny's. That's candy dish that was stuck to my sock. Would you like that, huh, pal? Oh boy, the kids is really hot tonight. No, huh? Well, I'd give you one of my cupcakes, but I know how much you hate chocolate. Would a little drooling on your stomach help convince you otherwise? Oh, you like chocolate? Okay then, you can have both of them. One thing I have to say about Toby, although he's got a rotten sense of humor, he's a nice kid. Naturally, once I'd eaten both cupcakes, which took approximately 4 seconds, I felt obliged to hang around and let Toby know I was grateful. What better way than to share a few of his cheese crackers? Well, Harold, Toby said sometime later, we've had quite a party. But I have to go to sleep now. I can keep my eyes open, so I'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out what happens in the next chapter. This is a good book, Harold. It's called Treasure Island. And it's by a man named Robert Louis Stevenson. It's kind of hard reading though. I have to keep looking the big words up in the dictionary, so it's taking me a long time to get through it. I've always had trouble with the words myself. Half the time they don't mean what I think they are going to, and then even when I do find out what they mean, I forget the next day anyway. You meant to say that I'm smart, but just not the scholarly type. But it's a really good story, Toby continued. It's all about the pirates and a little boy just like me. No dogs. And a parrot? Harold? A parrot? What's a parrot? Is there anything about chocolate cake? That's my idea of treasure. Well, good night, Harold. If you're going to sleep here, you will have to get off my stomach because it's a little full right now. Good night, Toby. I curled up at the foot of the bed, but I couldn't sleep trying to figure out what a parrot was. I thought it might be a ready pirate, since the words sounded something alike, but then again, I thought it might be an umbrella. Chester would know, I thought, so I went downstairs to ask him. Well, you certainly took your time, Chester snapped as I sauntered casually into the room. I finished my book half an hour ago. Where were you? It so happens I was discussing great works of literature with Toby. Since when is a Twinkies wrapper considered a great work of literature? I decided to ignore that. Unfortunately, several chocolate crumbles fell from my mouth to the floor at precisely that moment. As a matter of fact, I said, trying valiantly to regain my dignity. We were talking about Treasure Island. Ever hear of it? Ever hear of it? He sneered. I read that when I was a kitten. Oh, then tell me, Chester, what is a parrot? Chester looked at me scornfully. A parrot, he said, is a tropical gigantactical bird, order Ctesiformes, that has a stout, curved, hooked bill, is often crested, brightly variegated, and an excellent mimic. In other words, Harold, a parrot is a little bird with a big mouth. Oh, I said after a moment, I thought maybe it was an umbrella. Did you get so busy discussing parrot with Toby that you forgot you were going to meet me here? And this is important, Harold. I still wasn't sure what a parrot was, but I decided this was not the time to pursue it. Come over here, Chester commanded, indicating his chair, and let me show you this book. I looked at the chair. Chester was already sitting in it, with a very large book open in front of him. I don't think there's going to be room for both of us, Chester, I said. Come on. You're wasting time. Just jump up here. I surveyed the scene carefully. I knew I would have to get a running start, since there was just a tiny spot left for me and I would never be able to fit into it. If I pulled myself up slowly. Apparently I was taking too long for Chester's liking. Will you get up here? He hissed. Okay, if that's what we want. I ran and jumped onto the chair, landing with a great kerplunk. Chester, where are you? I cried. I couldn't see anything but the back of the chair. I had forgotten to turn myself around. I'm here, you great oaf. I turned my head. What are you doing on the floor? I asked. You knocked me off the chair. Now you just stay put. I'm coming back up. I moved to the back of the chair, and the chair landed on the front. Now let's see, he said. We both have to see the book. You come over here, and I will move this way. I don't know if you've ever watched a cat try to decide where to sit, but it involves a lot of circling around, sitting, getting up again, circling some more, thinking about it, lying down, standing up, bathing a paw or tail, and circling. A dog, on the other hand, sits. This looks like a good spot, a dog will say to himself. He will then lower his body to the spot in question, and is usually so secure in his decision that he will fall asleep immediately. Chester took what felt like 20 minutes to settle himself in, and just as I was drifting off, the kicks started. Come on, Harold, quit hogging the seat and wake up. What were you trying to do? Take a little cat nap? Ha ha ha! I yawned. Now, said Chester, turning to the book, let's get down to brass tacks. What exactly on your mind? I asked. This book and that rabbit, Chester replied. Now tell me, Harold, have you noticed anything funny about the rabbit? No, I said, but I've certainly noticed a lot of funny things about you recently. Think about it. That rabbit sleeps all day. So do I. So do you. Furthermore, he's got funny little sharp teeth. So do I. So do you. Furthermore, he gets in and out of his cage by himself. What kind of a rabbit can do that? A smart one, I said. I could do it. We're not talking about you, Harold. We are talking about the rabbit. Now, where do they find? At the movies. Yeah, but what movie? Dracula, I said. So? So, he said quickly. Remember the knot around the neck? What language in it? Was it? An obscure director of the Carpathian Mountain region. I answered smugly. He didn't know everything. Aha, Chester said. But what area of the Carpathian Mountain region? Area? What's an area? I looked at him blankly. Transylvania, he cried triumphantly. And that proves my point. What point? What are we talking about? And don't forget the white tomato. That's most important of all. But what? This book, said Chester, disregarding me, tells us just what we need to know. What? I practically screamed. What does it tell us? What does this book have to do with the Bunnicula? What are you talking about? What's going on here? I can't stand it anymore. Chester regarded me coolly. You are really very excitable, Harold. That's not good for your blood pressure. I put my paws around his throat. Tell me, I said in a low, threatening voice, or I will skid you till you pop. Okay, don't get upset. Now, this book tells you everything you've already wanted to know about a vampire, but we're afraid to ask. Personally, I had never wanted to know anything about vampires, but at the moment, I was afraid to tell that to Chester. I still don't understand what vampires have to do with our little furry friend. One, Chester said, vampires do not sleep at night. They sleep only during the day. The same holds true for this rabbit. Two, vampires can get in and out of locked rooms. Bunnicula gets in and out of his locked cage. This was beginning to interest me. Didn't you say something about the refrigerator? That's right, he got the refrigerator open all by himself. 3, vampires have long pointed teeth. They are called fangs. Well, don't we have fangs? No, we have canines. That's different. What's different about it? Fangs are more pointed, and the vampires use fangs to bite people on the neck. Yuck! Who'd want to do that? Vampires would, that's who. Wait a minute. I saw Mrs. Monroe bite Mr. Monroe on the neck once. Does that mean she's a vampire? Boy, are you dumb. She's not a vampire. She's a lawyer. She bites necks. I don't think that's quite the same thing. No, Bunnicula does not bite people on the neck. At least, not so far. But he does bite vegetables. On the neck? I asked. Vegetables don't have necks, Harold. Vegetables are like that. It's like dogs. Dogs don't have brains. Dogs are like that. Oh yeah? I said. Of course he bites vegetables. Our rabbit bites the vegetables. He bites them, Harold, but he does not eat them. The tomato was all white. What does that mean? It means that he paints vegetables, I ventured. It means that he bites vegetables to make a hole in them, and then he sucks out all the juices. But what about all the lettuce and the carrots that Toby has been feeding him in his cage? Aha, what indeed, Chester said. Look at this. Whereupon he stuck his paw under the chair cushion and brought out with a flourish of assortment of strange white objects. Some of them looked like unironed handkerchiefs, and the others, didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. What are they? I asked. Chester smiled. Lettuce and carrots, he said. White lettuce and carrots. I found them hidden behind his cage. I was aghast. What did it all mean? Could Chester be right? Was this a harmless-looking little ball of fluff really a vampire? Just then Chester let out a yelp. Look, he said, the cage is empty again. Oh, we are fools. We will let him get out of our sight. It's your fault. My fault. You are the one who took 20 minutes to sit down. Well, if you hadn't knocked me up in the first place, wait a minute, why are we arguing? Let's find the Bunnicula. Just then, we heard the clicks in the kitchen. Refrigerator, I whispered. Chester nodded. We jumped it down and moved cautiously to the kitchen door. Shh, Chester warned unnecessarily as we crept along. Don't make any noise. We don't want him to hear us coming. Obviously, I retorted. The light went out under the door. He must have closed the refrigerator, Chester said. Easy now. We pushed the door open. The kitchen was dark. There was not a sound. Psst, Chester. What? I can't see. I can, but I can't see him. He's not here. There was a soft scamper across the linoleum, and we turned just in time to see a little white tail bounce out of the door into the living room. Drat, we've missed him. Come on, Harold. Let's see if we can catch up with him. Chester started toward the door. Wait, Chester. What's that on the floor by the refrigerator? He turned. This new object interested him more than following Bunnicula. Watch out, he said. I'll take care of this. He slunk across the room slowly, muscles taut, eyes alert. When he was about 6 inches away, he stuck out his paw, closed his eyes, and batted at the object tentatively. I don't think he made any contact. Get closer, I said. Chester's eyes popped open. Who's the cat here? He asked. I know what I'm doing. And he proceeded to bat the air 3 more times. What is it? I squealed, as my throat contracted in fear. I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's not alive. Oh boy, if I wait for you, we will be here all night. I walked bravely to the object and sniffed it. Well, asked Chester. Beats me. Chester came closer. After a moment of close examination, he gasped. I jumped. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Harold, Chester heard her brother. What? It's... What is it, Chester? It's a white zucchini. Chapter 5. Chester goes into his act. The next morning, I was awakened by a scream. Robert, come down here right away. There's something wrong in the kitchen. For a moment, panic seized me. I thought I should run out of dog food. But then I remembered the events of the previous evening. Mr. Murner came bouncing down the stairs. Chester, I cried. Did you see Mr. Murner? His face has turned white. It's Bunnicula, isn't it? No, he said calmly. It's shaving cream, you idiot. By now, the excitement in the kitchen was at full throttle. The table was covered with Bunnicula's handiwork. There were white beans, and white peas, and white squash, and white tomatoes, and white lettuce, and white zucchini. What can it mean, Robert? Mrs. Murner was saying. I'm getting worried. 1 tomato is a curiosity, but this is unheard of. There must be something wrong with our refrigerator. That's it. It's turning all the vegetables white. But look, she said. I left these tomatoes on the windowsill, and they are white too. And this squash I left in the bowl on the table. At that moment, Pete and Toby came into the kitchen. Holy cow, what's going on? Hey, maybe it's a vegetable blight, Mom. Could that be, Robert? Did you ever heard of anything like that? Well, no, actually. I've heard of a blight, but nothing like this. Chester leaned my way. This will take forever if we leave it up to them. Sometimes human beings can be so slow. I started to answer him, but he was heading for the table. What about that friend of yours in the agriculture department? Oh, Tom Cragen? Could we call him and ask him if we were doing something wrong? It's a DDT, Mom, Peter interjected. I know about this stuff, but it's because you buy vegetables that aren't organic. All vegetables are organic, Peter, Mrs. Monroe replied. That's not what my teacher said. See, Toby, I told you this would happen. They're using chemicals on our food, and if you're not careful, you will turn white too. Like that. Robert, couldn't you take that shaving cream off your face? Oh yeah, of course. Where's my towel? I know I brought it down with me. For that matter, where was Chester? I'd seen him going toward the table, but I'd lost the track of him listening to all the talk about DDT. I just hope that they didn't use any of that stuff while they grew chocolate cupcakes. Pete, did you take my towel? Why would I take your towel, Dad? I don't shave. Just then the door swung open. I could not believe my eyes. There was Chester with Mr. Monroe's towel draped across his back and tied under his neck like a cape. That was strange enough, but on his face was an expression that sent chills down on my spine. His eyes were wide and staring. The corners of his mouth were pulled back in an evil grimace. His teeth were bared and grinning in the morning light. He cackled menacingly and threw back his head as if he were laughing all about us. I thought he'd completely lost his mind. There's my towel. What's the matter, Chester? Were you cold? Mr. Monroe bent down to take the towel off from Chester. Before he could lay his hands on it, Chester flipped over onto his back, closed his eyes, and folded his paws over his chest. It was a hideous sight. He opened his eyes wide. With a paws outstretched, he slowly lifted his head. His eyes glazed and vacant. Soon the upper half of his body followed, all in one smooth flow, until he was in sitting position. Hey, Dad, did you leave your brandy glass out last night? Chester is acting a little weird. We're some catcher funny creatures. I glanced at Chester. He wasn't laughing. Psst, Chester, what are you up to? I'm a vampire, you dolt. Can't you tell? I'm trying to warn them. Well, it's not working. You'd better think of something else. Chester frowned, apparently deep in thought. So you see, Toby, Mr. Monroe was explaining, all cats are as individual as all people. Maybe he just wants to get our attention. Isn't that right, kitty cat? Ordinarily, Chester would have left the room upon being called kitty cat, but he was lost in thought. Come on, Chester, give me back my towel. Mr. Monroe moved toward Chester. Chester's eyes lit up. He looked at me and smiled. I sensed that I was not going to like what he had in mind. I was toying with the notion of slinking under the table when Chester fixed me with his eyes. How deep they were, like black pools. I felt myself floating, lost in them, my will no longer my own. I felt an inexplicable urge to murmur, "Yes, master," when he worked slowly, steadily toward me. As he drew nearer, I found myself unable to move. He stopped before me, never taking his gaze from me, and lunged. Yo! Mom, Chester bit Harold on the neck. Oh, that wasn't a real bite, was it, Chester? That was a love bite. Isn't that cute? Love bite my foot. That hurt. Chester, what's the matter with you? I sputtered. Do I look like a tomato? Oh, it doesn't matter anyway, Harold. They don't understand. How can human beings read the same books I do and still be so thick? Our conversation was interrupted. Mrs. Monroe picked Chester up and cuddled him. I was praying she would not insert to injury by kissing his nose, which he hates more than anything. Poor Chester, do you need a little love? Do you know what I'm going to do? You big ball of fuzz, you. I could tell what was coming. I'm going to kiss you on your little nose. Yep, I could tell that was coming all right. Chester knew better than to resist. He went limp in Mrs. Monroe's arms. Mr. Monroe took his towel off Chester. I still don't know why he's wearing my towel, he said. I think he must be cold, dear. Here's your towel. Why don't you get his kitty sweater? Chester looked ill, and he can wear that all day. As Chester was being buttoned into his bright yellow sweater with a little purple mice and cowboy hats all over it. Mr. Monroe said, "What about those vegetables? Should I speak to Tom Cregan?" "Yes, dear," Mrs. Monroe said. "Why don't you? I'm sure there's some explanation. In the meantime, I'll change market. To tell you the truth, I'm really much more worried about Chester. We'd better keep our eye on him. Chester and I did not speak out until late in the afternoon. I was busy nursing my neck, and Chester was busy hiding under the sofa, too embarrassed to be seen. When we did speak at last, it was a brief exchange. "Hey, Chester," I called when he finally crawled out from under. "We don't have to worry about any vampire bunnies anymore. All you have to do is just stand outside his cage in that sweater, and he will laugh himself to death." Chester was not amused. "That's right, make fun, all of you. No one understands. I tried to warn them, and they wouldn't heed. Now I'm going to take matters into my own hands." Whereupon Chester and his 16 purple mice went into the kitchen for dinner. Chapter 6. Harold Helps Out. That night I had an uneasy sleep. Strange noises emanated from downstairs. It sounded like toenails were clicking back and forth on the floor. It must be Bunnicula making his midnight run, I thought, although I'd never known him to make a sound. And I smelled the funniest odor in the air, something familiar, though I couldn't place it. As the night progressed, it grew stronger and stronger, until finally it tickled my nose, and I sneezed myself awake. I jumped off Toby's bed, still sniffling, and headed down the stairs for the living room to find Chester to see if he could smell it too. The odor grew even stronger as I approached the living room. Standing in the doorway was Chester, a strange pendant hanging from his neck. "Phew, Chester," I said. "What are you wearing that awful thing for? It smells." "Of course it smells," he replied. "Here, I made one for you, too. Put it on." "Are you kidding? That thing smells like a garlic." "It is garlic," Chester stated matter-of-factly. "Why are you wearing garlic?" I asked, thinking that by this time Chester was capable of anything. As we walked into the living room, I tripped on another piece of garlic lying in the doorway. "Careful," said Chester. "Watch your step." I surveyed the room and saw that it was strewn with garlic on the doorways, over the windows, and around Bunnicula's cage. The poor little fellow had buried his nose as far as possible under his blanket. I was about to follow his example and return to Tom's bed to bury my nose under the blankets when Chester grabbed my tail with his teeth. "You're not leaving this room until you put this on," he grumbled at me. I think that's what he said. I wasn't sure because he had my tail in his mouth. "It's not polite to talk with your mouth full." Chester dropped that tail. Meanwhile, my eyes were beginning to water. "Listen," Chester snapped at me, fortunately letting go of my tail first. The book said to use garlic." "What book?" I asked. "The Joy of Cooking?" Chester continued. "The mark of the vampire says garlic renders vampires immobile." "What does that mean?" "It means they can't go anywhere if there's garlic around. Well, I've got news for you, Chester. I can't go anywhere either. The smell is killing me. But you've got to put it on. It says so in the book. If you don't put it on, I will put it on for you." "No, Chester," I said as my nose suddenly and involuntarily closed. "I'll be leaving this room right now." And I did. I was so sick to my stomach from the aroma that I decided to spend the early morning hours outdoors. As dawn approached, it seemed that it would be a peaceful day. The sky was clear, the birds were singing, and I felt contented after my difficult night just to be lying in the grass, feeling the ladybugs crawl up my ears. Suddenly the calm was broken. Strange, piercing screams came from this area of the kitchen. "Not again," I thought. What turned white now? As it happened, it was Chester. There in the sink, lathered with soap, was the feline detective, yelling his head off. Mrs. Muller was scrubbing him vigorously, and from the sound of her voice was in the middle of a long lecture. "I don't know what got into you, Chester. You never played with the garlic before. I thought you hated the smell of it, and here you've gotten it all over yourself. Stop wiggling. You will get some in your eyes. If you want to chew on something, I will get you some catnip. But stay out of my bad herbs. Then she rinsed him off, rubbed him with a towel, and plunked him down in front of the stove to finish drying. Shut the door, he hissed at me. I'm freezing. That silly woman. Doesn't she know cat doesn't get bath? What do you mean? I get baths all the time, I said, closing the door with my back foot. That's because you're too dumb to bath yourself. Cats always bath themselves. It's a rule. Everyone knows that. Well, at least it smells nice in here again. I sniffed as I settled down next to Chester by the stove. And it's all toasty warm here in the kitchen. Sure, it smells nice again, he said. But now the house isn't safe anymore. What do you mean? I asked, getting closer. I mean, it worked last night. The garlic worked. No more vegetables turned white, did they? No, but that means Bunnicula didn't get out of his cage last night. Maybe he was just tired, I said, or maybe he was full. Don't be ridiculous, he replied. It was the garlic. He couldn't leave his cage. But tonight he will be free to roam again, and I've got to find a way to stop him that isn't smelly. Mr. and Mrs. Monroe was hurrying in and out of the room, stepping over us, late for work. Mrs. Monroe yelled to Toby, Don't forget to take the stick out of the freeze when you get home today, Toby, and leave it on the table to defrost. And this time, remember to put a plate on the lid. Chetter's ears perked up. Of course, he said. That's what I'll do. And he strolled past me with a knowing smile. Mrs. Monroe turned off the stove and left the room. It was too much for me to figure out, so I went to sleep on the nice warm kitchen floor. I was awakened by a bite on the ear. Chetter was sitting by me, looking very impatient. Boy, nothing wakes you up, he said. I've been yelling you, poking at you for 10 minutes. I was dreaming, I answered defensively, about a place where there weren't any cats around to bother nice dogs and wake them up when they needed their rest. You can finish sleeping later, he said crisply. Right now, you have to help me. Do what? I asked. Get Bunnicula out of the cage. I sprang back. Get him out of the cage? I thought that was what you didn't want. I thought you said he was dangerous, so what if he attacks me? Aren't you ashamed? Chester replied. Afraid of a harmless little bunny. Harmless? I thought you said he was a threat to this house and everyone in it. Isn't that what you said? Isn't that what we've been talking about all this time? He is a threat, but only at night. During the day, he's just a very sleepy little rabbit. And that's why we have to do it now, while the sun is still up. Follow me, he said. There isn't much time. Toby stayed down here, and the others will be home soon. Boy, you must have been tired, Harold. You slept through lunch. I followed Chetter into the living room. My heart was pounding as he unlocked the cage door with his paw. It looked as if he had years of experience opening locks. The door swung open. Bunnicula was sleeping peacefully. He did, however, look a little green around the gills, probably from the garlic. I was just wondering how a rabbit could have gills when Chetter said, Okay, Harold, do you stop while I get what I need from the kitchen. Well, what do you want me to do? I can't read your mind. Get him out of the cage and out onto the floor, and I'll be right back, Chetter said. What? I realized. How am I supposed to do that? Use your head, he answered, and he was gone. Looking at the cage, I realized that was precisely what I would have to do. Until this moment, I had never had to face the possibility of actual physical contact with a real live rabbit. I looked upon my chore reluctantly. I seemed to recall my grandfather telling me that one picked a rabbit up by his neck with one's teeth. This I attempted, though the very idea set my stomach churning. I squeezed my head through the tiny door and gently placed my teeth around the skin of the bunny's neck. To avoid any suggestion of violence, I've never been one for the sport of hunting. I preferred to think of myself as the creature's mother, carrying it up to safety. Unfortunately, I couldn't carry it anywhere For once my head was in the cage, it wouldn't come out again. I could go neither forward nor backward. At that moment, Chettle appeared at the door, carrying in his mouth what looked every bit like a nice, big, juicy raw steak. My eyes popped, my teeth dropped Bunnicula, my mouth opened, and I began to drool. After all, I had missed the lunch. Chettle, what are you doing with that steak? Haven't you gotten him out of there yet? I can't get either of us out of here. My head is stuck. Oh, Harold, sometimes I despair. Here, I'll get you both out. I should have done everything myself. He came over, dropped the stick just a few feet away from me, and climbed on my shoulders. You pull your head out while I push against the cage. Who gets the steak? I asked. Don't worry about the steak, I heralded. Just pull. I would have more motivation if I knew who is to get the steak. Chettle ignored me. I pulled. He pushed. I felt something go pop. We all fell in a jumble. Chettle, the cage, Bunnicula, and me. When I looked around, Bunnicula was lying next to me, still sound asleep. There you are, I said. We got him on. Now let's eat. No dice, Chester said. Just read this to me so I'll be sure I'm doing it right. And he handed me a book. That book again. Start at the top of the page, Chester said, as he picked up the stick. Why don't you read and I'll hold the stick? Chester replied. I took it to mean that I was to start reading. To destroy the vampire and end his reign of terror, it is necessary to pound a sharp stick. Chester interrupted. A sharp steak? He asked. What does that mean? I'll taste it and tell you if it's sharp. I offered. Oh, never mind. This will do. It's so long. Keep reading. To pound a sharp stick into the vampire's heart. This must be done during the daylight hours when the vampire has no powers. Okay, he said, this is it. I'm sorry I had to go this far, but if they'd listened, this wouldn't have been necessary. He dragged the stick across the floor and laid it across the inert bunny. Then with his paws, he began to hit the stick. Are you sure this is what they mean, Chester? Am I anywhere near his heart? He asked. It's hard to tell, I said. All I can really see are his nose and his ears. You know, he's really sort of cute. Chester was getting the glint in his eyes again. He was pounding away at the stick harder and harder. Be careful, I cried. You will hurt him. Chester increased his attack. I was really getting worried when the door opened and Mr. and Mrs. Morno was suddenly with us in the room. Chester and Mrs. Morno screamed, What are you doing with my dinner? Robert, get the steak away from the Chester. And what's the matter with Bunnicula? Why is he on the floor? Mr. Morno took the beautiful steak away. I wished it had fallen the pale well with the tears in my eyes as the kitchen door swung open. Chester whispered with a cold determination, All right, the last resort, and dashed into the kitchen. Seconds later, he was back carrying his water dish between his teeth. He ran toward the Bunnicula and with a mad yell threw the dish of water at the rabbit. Unfortunately, he was so hysterical that his aim was not the best. With the water dripping from my ears, I watched Mr. Morno pick the Chester up by the scruff of his neck and toss him unnecessarily out the front door. Unceremoniously, out the front door. Robert, we are going to have to do something about the cat. Look at this mess. Dinner's ruined. The poor bunny is out of his cage, and the Harold is sopping wet. I tried to look as pathetic I knew how. Oh, poor Harold, Mrs. Monlot cooed as she dried me off. You've had a rough day, you and Bunnicula. I don't know what's the matter with your friend, but unless he learns how to behave, he will just have to spend the night outside. Mr. Molnar, meanwhile, had restored Bunnicula to his cage and the cage to the windowsill. I couldn't believe it when I saw that Bunnicula was still asleep. And Mr. Molnar said, the steak is ruined. Why don't we let Harold have it? He deserved a treat anyway, don't you, old boy? I panted appropriately. After my delicious dinner, I turned my attention to the bag, still lying open on the floor. Another method of destroying the vampire is to immerse the body in water. The body will then shrivel and disappear as the vampire emits one last scream of terror. Phew, I thought. So that's what he was trying to do. Thank goodness he missed. I had no regrets about missing a scene like that. Poor Bunnicula. I looked over toward the cage, and there one on the other side of the window was a pathetic tabby face looking in. His little nose was pressed against the window. I couldn't hear him, but from the movement of his lips, I could see he was very unhappy. Poor Chatter. As for me, Mrs. Muller spent the evening patting me, and the family chatted with me all night long. And of course, I'd had my yummy steak dinner. So, it wasn't such a bad day after all. Except that now my steak was all gone. Poor Harold. Chapter 7. A New Friend in Need. In the days that followed, Chester's behavior was exemplary. He pulled and he cooed and he cleaned his paws, and he rubbed up against everyone's legs to show what a good boy he was. I was getting worried. Chester acted that way only when he had something devious in the back of his mind, but I didn't know what it was. He had tried everything in the book to get rid of vampires, and all his efforts had failed. But I knew from the expression on his face that something was definitely up. Of course, I didn't know for certain because he had not spoken to me since the steak incident. I guess I realized that my hurt just wasn't in the destruction of the bunny vampire. In fact, I was beginning to like the little fellow. The Mullers were relieved by Chester's improved behavior. They didn't know how to account for his strange doings, but to their credit, they were willing to let bygones be bygones. The only disturbing factor in all our lives was the reappearance of the white vegetables each morning in the kitchen. And yet, after a few days, even they stopped and the life seemed to return to normal. One evening, I dropped by Bunnicula's cage to chat. I found myself doing that more and more since Chester had stopped talking to me. Of course, Bunnicula didn't talk back, but he was a good listener. I'd begun to think of him as a friend, a strange one, granted, but one can't always choose one's friends. I was distressed this particular evening to see that he was dragging his ears, as it were. He looked tired and listless. I felt his nose, and it seemed a little warmer than it should have been. I became alarmed. I ran over to Toby, who was doing a picture puzzle on the floor, and began to bark. Something I do only in cases of extreme emergency, since even I do not care for the sound. "What's the matter, Harold?" Toby asked without moving. "Are there burglars?" I ran to the cage and looked at Bunnicula. I looked back at Toby and whimpered. Toby just looked confused. "Do you want to play with Bunnicula? Shall I take him out of the cage?" "Woof!" I responded, indicating I hoped that was indeed what he should do. "I'll ask Mom and Dad, Harold. You wait here." He was back in a minute, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, Harold, but Mom said you can't play with the rabbit. It causes too much commotion." I looked down at the floor and whimpered again. "Sorry, Harold. Maybe later, when we are in here together." I regarded Bunnicula, whose eyes met mine. He gave a little shudder, and I felt like crying. My friend was sick, and I didn't know what to do. I wished I could tell Chester, but I knew it was no use. He was just too mad at me. I would have to sort this one out on my own. That night, I couldn't sleep worrying about Bunnicula. I decided to go downstairs and check on his cold condition. What I saw when I entered the living room horrified me. Bunnicula was out of his cage on the floor, while Chester stood in front of him, a piece of garlic around his neck and his arms outstretched, blocking the kitchen door. Suddenly, it all fell into place. Chester was starving Bunnicula. Of course, that's why he seemed so listless, and that's why the vegetables had stopped turning white. Chester had made it impossible for Bunnicula to eat. Chester jumped a very high jump. What are you doing down here? He spat at me as he landed. I know what you're doing, Chester, and the jig is up. That little bunny never hurt anybody. All he's doing is eating his own way. What do you care if it drains a few vegetables? He's a vampire. Chester snarled. Today vegetables, tomorrow the world. I think perhaps you're overstating your case, I suggested cautiously. Go back to bed, Harold. This is larger than the two of us. It may seem harsh, but I'm only being cruel to be kind. Who's being kind to? I wondered as I went back upstairs. The tomatoes and the zucchinis of the world? Maybe a few cabbages? It just didn't make sense. But I could see I wasn't going to get anywhere with Chester tonight. Tomorrow, however, would be another story, and I was determined that by hook or by crook, my friend Bunnicula would eat by sundown the next day. Chapter 8. Disaster in the dining room. I realized that there was nothing I could do for Bunnicula during the day, since he was sleeping, but that gave me time to play my strategy. At first, I thought I would bring food to his cage, but then it occurred to me that Chester must be taking everything away that was given to him. Pete and Toby usually let letters for Bunnicula during the day while he was sleeping, and Chester, ever watchful, probably nabbed it each evening just before the rabbit work. No, there would have to be another way. I thought and thought all afternoon, and I could see that Chester had done a good job of isolating Bunnicula from his food. There was no way I could think of to overcome Chester's game plan. As evening drew closer and I grew more and more frantic, I stumbled into the dining room and saw the answer to my problems sitting before me on the table. It was a big bowl of salad. All I had to do was get Bunnicula to the salad and let him get his fill before family came in to eat. With that funny white dressing on it, they would never notice if a few vegetables were white. I ran to the hallway to check the clock. 6:15. It would be 15 minutes before the sun went down and Bunnicula woke up. I would then need at least 5 minutes to get him from his cage to the table and feed him. All I had to do was make sure no one came into the room until he had finished. I needed a good 20 minutes at least. I went back into the living room. Chester was asleep on his brown velvet chair, shedding in his sleep, still worn out from the previous night's activities. I checked upstairs. Toby was reading in his room the last chapter of Treasure Island. I noted Pete, who should have been doing his homework, was listening to records in his room. I ran down to the kitchen. Hello, Harold, Mrs. Monroe said as I came through the door. What's new? Other than a rabbit starving in the next room and an imminent attack on your salad bowl. Nothing, I thought. I stood at her feet and panted. She scratched my head. This gave me a moment to check out how far she was in her cooking. Sorry, Harold, she said. I have to baste this chicken. I noticed the oven timer still had 35 minutes to go. It will be tight. I thought, but I can make it. Now where is Mr. Monroe? I went to the front door and whimpered loudly. Mrs. Monroe followed me. Are you waiting for Daddy, Harold? He will be home soon. Soon isn't good enough. How soon? I whimpered again. Patient boy. He's late at a school meeting. He should be here at any time. She went back into the kitchen and I checked the clock. 6:25. It was getting dark and Chester was still asleep. Time to swing into action. Having watched Chester undo the lock on Bunnicula's cage, and having participated in that unfortunate steak episode some days earlier, I knew I would have no problem getting Bunnicula out. I just had to be a little more careful where I positioned my head so that I wouldn't find myself in the humiliating predicament of getting back a second time. My timing was perfect, with Bunnicula swinging perfectly peacefully from my teeth. I made my way stealthily toward the dining room as the last rays of sunlight gave way to the dark of night. Once inside the dining room door, Bunnicula awakened in great bewilderment. It is not every day, after all, that one finds oneself, upon awakening, hanging from the jaws of a fellow creature, even so caring and gentle a creature as myself. Bunnicula opened his eyes wide and turned his face as best he could to me. I jumped up onto the nearest chair and placed the rabbit safely on the table's edge. "Okay," I whispered. "There's your dinner. Go to it. Get your fill as fast as you can." "Poor Bunny. I'll stand guard." I don't know that Bunnicula fully understood what was going on, but the sight of the vegetables piled high in the center of the table sent him scurrying in their direction. He was very hungry. As luck would have it, and as I should have anticipated, Chester's sense of timing was as astute as my own. No sooner had Bunnicula reached the edge of the salad bowl than the door swung open and Chester bounded into the room. He surveyed the scene frantically. I was unable to act fast enough. Upon seeing Bunnicula about to enjoy his first bit of nourishment in days, Chester leaped across the table, seemingly without touching floor, chairs, and anything else between himself and our furry friend, and landed directly on top of the bunny. "No, you don't," he shrieked. Bunnicula, not sure what to do, jumped high in the air and landed with a great scattering of grins, smack in the center of the salad bowl. Lettuce and tomatoes and carrots and cucumbers went flying all over the table and onto the floor. Chester flattened his ears, wiggled his real end, and smiled in anticipation. To cat observers, this is known as the attack position. "Run, Bunnicula!" I shouted. Bunnicula turned in my direction, as if to ask where. "Anywhere," I cried. "To get out of his way!" Chester sprang. Bunnicula jumped, and in the flash of a second, they had changed the positions. Chester now found himself flat on his back, owing to the slipperiness of the salad dressing in the bowl, and Bunnicula, too dazed to even think about the food now, hovered quibbling on the table. Chester was having a great deal of difficulty getting back on his feet, but I know it was only a matter of seconds before I had the attack again, and I knew also that Bunnicula was too petrified to do anything to save himself, so I did the only thing I could. I barked very loudly and very rapidly. The whole family rushed through the doors. Mr. Malone must have just come from because his coat was still on. "Oh no," cried Mrs. Murnau. "That's Chester. That is Chester's last stand." Chester rolled his eyes. He wouldn't word and didn't even try to move. "Mom," said Toby, tugging at his mother's arm. "Look at Bunnicula. How did he get out of his cage? He looks scared." "Of course he's scared," Mrs. Murnau said. "We probably forgot to latch his cage and he got out. And I think Chester has been chasing him." Toby put his face close to the rabbit. "Mom, doesn't Bunnicula look kind of sick? We'd better take them all to the vet to see if any damage was done," she answered. I started to whimper. "No need for me to go to the vet." Mr. Murnau patted my head. "We may as well take Harold along," he said. "He's probably due for his shot." Mrs. Murnau carefully picked Chester out of the salad bowl and carried him by the scruff of the neck to the kitchen. "I'm going to give Chester a quick bath," she said to Mr. Murnau. "Why don't you put together a fresh salad? Toby, you and Pete put Bunnicula back in his cage and then clean up the table." I didn't stick around for an assignment. This was not the time to be in the way. And besides, I now had a whole evening and a night ruined worrying about the next morning's visit to the vet. This little effort of mine, I thought, has been disaster in more ways than one. Chapter 9. All words that end well. Almost. Looking back on that night, I remember thinking that this whole mess could never be resolved happily. What would become of Bunnicula, my new friend, who was suffering from starvation? And what about Chester, my old friend, who seemed to have flipped his lid and, if you will pardon the expression, was in the doghouse with the Monroes? Of far greater concern at that time, of course, was my own future, but on that night all that consumed my thoughts was the fear of the next day's injections. It all seemed hopeless indeed. But looking back on the next day, I can tell you that happy endings are possible, even in situations as fraught with complications as this one was. Early the next morning, we all piled into the car, some of us with greater reluctance than others, and thundered off the bed. And by afternoon, we were on our way to solving our problems. The vet worked everything out very nicely. He discovered that Bunnicula was suffering from extreme hunger. I could have told him that. Rather than jar his frail stomach with solid food, the doctor decided he should be put on a liquid diet until he get better. So Bunnicula was immediately given some carrot juice, which he drank eagerly. After he finished, he looked over at me with a great grin on his face and winked. Chester was diagnosed as being emotionally overwrought. It was suggested that he start sessions with a cat psychiatrist to work out what the doctor called a case of sibling rivalry with Bunnicula. I asked Chester later what a sibling was, but he wasn't speaking to me. So I looked it up. It's like a brother or sister, and a sibling rivalry means you are competing with your brother or sister for attention. I wasn't sure this was Chester's problem, but it sure explained a lot about Toby and Pete. As for me, well, I came out the best. Dr. Wussman was all set to give me my shot, and when the nurse came in with my card, "Wait, doctor, the dog doesn't need his shot yet. It's too soon." So I got a pat on the head and the doggy pop instead. These days, everything is back to normal in the Monroe household, almost. Bunnicula liked his liquid diet, so much that the Monroes have kept him on it. And oddly enough, there had been no problems with vegetables mysteriously turning white since. Chester, of course, insists that this proves his theory. Obviously, Harold, the liquefied vegetables take the place of the vegetable juices, so Bunnicula had no need to go roaming anymore. Then he's not a vampire, I said. Nonsense. He's a vampire, all right, but he's a modern vampire. He gets his juices from a blender. Case closed, Sherlock? I queried. Case closed. Oh, Chester. Yes, Harold? What are those two funny marks on your neck? Chester jumped and I laughed. Very funny, he said, as he began to bathe his tail. Very funny. The Monroes never knew anything of Chester's theory. They changed the market, and to this day believe they were the victims of a curious vegetable blight. Bunnicula and I have become good friends. He still didn't say anything, but he snuggles up next to me by the fireplace, and we take a long, cozy snooze together. One night I sang him a lullaby in the obscure dialect of his homeland, and he slept very peacefully. It was that night that cemented our friendship. Now, about Chester, I said that everything was back to normal. Almost naturally. Chester is the almost. He has been seeing his psychiatrist, Dr. Baruch Katz, twice a week for some time now. He takes his therapy very seriously. The other morning I was trying to get a little sleep when Chester came over and nudged me in the ribs. Harold, do you realize we've never really communicated? I mean, really communicated? I opened one eye cautiously. And in order to communicate, Harold, you have to really be in touch with yourself. Are you in touch with yourself, Harold? Can you look yourself in the mirror and say, I know who I am. I am in touch with the meanness that is me, and I can reach out to the you-ness that is you. I closed my eye. I'm used to it by now. He talks like that all the time. He no longer reads Edgar Allan Poe at night. And once he concluded that he had been right about Bunnicula, there has been no more talk about the vampires. The mark of the vampire sits its usefulness obsolete on its shelf. Right now, he is reading Finding Yourself by screaming aloud. And the other night, when I heard the most awful noise coming from the basement, I didn't even bat an eyelid. I knew it was just a chatter finding himself, as he called it. He explained to me that he's getting to touch with his kittenhood, and I told him that's fine, just to let me know when he's going to do it, so I can be elsewhere. I've had enough trouble from Chester's adventures. So that's my story, and the story of a mysterious stranger who no longer seems quite so mysterious and who is definitely no longer a stranger. I've presented the fact as clearly as I could, and I leave it to you, dear reader, to draw your own conclusions. I must now bring this narrative to a close, since it is Friday night, Toby's night to stay up late and read, and I can hear the clicking of cellophane. I can only hope it covers 2 chocolate cupcakes with cream filling. 사도 끝냈습니다.